Okay, everyone, we're going to look again at correlation, and we're looking at it from the idea of scatterplots. And the reason I felt that we needed to clarify this issue a little bit more is because as I've taught the course, I've seen a lot of questions about how do I know if it's weak or if it's strong? How do I know it's a correlation or if it's not a correlation? How do I know some of these things? And when I was building a few more questions into the homework assignment, I realized that some of the books are using the word association instead of correlation. And so I wanted to introduce you to this new word of association. In other words, how well do these two concepts associate to each other, which is the same idea as the correlation of the two ideas. So I wanted to give you that new word so that you wouldn't be surprised when you see it in your homework on this particular assignment. So remember we talked about in correlation that there are some questions that we have to answer. So I'm going to start with that and review what those questions are. The very first question you have to ask yourself is it a correlation or an association? Because they may use that term as well, okay? So how do we know if it is a correlation? How do we tell this? Well, first of all, we know it's a correlation if it comes together into some form of a line. So if we have dots scattered all over the place like this with no obvious pattern to them, this has no pattern, it's randomly scattered. Okay? So therefore, this one has no correlation. Another one they might give you might be something that's grouped up in one place and then grouped up in another place and maybe even a third place. Okay? Again, that one has no correlation or no association. I'm going to have to make my dots a little bigger so you can see them, because they're not showing up too well. Okay, we'll make them a little bit larger here. So again, this one is no correlation as well, because there's no consistent pattern to this thing, other than they kind of are grouped together. But again, this is no correlation. Whereas this pattern that has a grouping, but it's a grouping that has a tendency to run in one direction. So therefore, this one is correlation. This one is correlation or association. Okay? The next question you're going to ask is the correlation linear or not? That means, does it make a line? Well, as we look at these, they're not correlation, but this one, which is, I can make a line in this. It kind of runs along that line, right? Therefore, this one is linear, okay? But let's look at some that are not linear. Make sure it still shows up. Okay, this one kind of has a correlation because, as you can see, it kind of comes together in a pattern, but it's not linear because it is not a straight line. it actually makes more of a curved line. So although you might have some correlation with this, this one is no linear correlation. And we're looking mostly for linear correlation. So this one is no linear correlation. You see the difference between no correlation and no linear correlation. This one would be no correlation because it's all scattered with no pattern at all. This one has a pattern. It's a curved pattern, as you can see. And so it's not linear, but it is a pattern. So there's no linear correlation. Okay? Now, let's look at another question. And the question is it positive or negative? So question 3, positive or negative? And that question has to deal with what direction does the line run as you go from left or right, left to right. Okay? This one up here, as we go from left to right, moves in an upward direction. Therefore, this one is a positive linear correlation. And so we will put that whole part of the title on it. Okay? Let's look at another one. Okay, as we look at that one, you can see it's running in a downward pattern. So this one is a negative linear correlation. And the last question we have to ask ourselves is number 4. Is it weak or strong? How do you tell the difference between weak and strong? Weak or strong is going to relate to how close are these dots to the line as you run a line from the dot to the line it's perpendicular to. If we look at these two that we have drawn already, this one is weaker than this one because it has quite a few dots that are quite a ways from the line. This one and this one and this one are farther from the line. This would only be the one a little bit like that one. And so this would be definitely a weak one. This one could be a judgment call. Somebody might call it moderate or something. So this is a more moderate one. It's not really totally weak, nor is it totally strong. Whereas one that was strong would have the dots lining real close to the line of correlation. You see that last one? You see how close the dots are to that line of correlation? This one would definitely be strong, and it would be called a strong, positive, linear correlation. So, hopefully this will help you guys understand a little better what it means when we're talking about correlation, not a correlation, strong correlation, not linear correlation. It will help you to understand a little bit more what all this is about. And I'm hoping that it will clarify some of your questions as you look at this particular subject in the future semesters. That this is not, it's not hard. We're not going all the way into correlation where we actually figure out what that line is. All we're doing is looking at the picture of it, getting the idea in our minds of what the image is when we're seeing a line of correlation and whether it's weak or it's strong. Another thing that might help you with correlation is this. If your correlation is close to a -1 for negative correlation and close to a +1 for positive correlation, the correlation will be strong. But since we are not figuring out the coefficient of correlation, we do not know those, okay? Only if we figured all that out would we be able to know that, and we're not doing that. But the closer it is to 0, the less correlation there is, whether it's from the positive or the negative. If it's close to 0, you have closer and closer to no correlation. Close to a -1, you're close to a strong negative correlation, linear correlation. If it's close to 1, you're now going to have a strong positive linear correlation. So you can see this is a little more explanation than what we've done on correlation in the other videos. And I'm hoping that this will really help you to get through those added assignments that I gave, added problems I gave in assignment number 20, and that you'll have a deeper understanding and you won't miss these as much when we go over them to prepare for the test. Good luck, guys.